Among conservative supporters, Pierre Poilievre's net approval rating is 38 points higher than Charest's. Joining us now to talk about his story and the poll upon which it is based is our friend Spencer Fernando. Great to see you. Would you agree with me, Spencer, that the number one thing about Pierre Poilievre is that he's a fighter? That would be if you had to choose one word. Sure, he's conservative. He talks about freedom. He's smart on economics. But I think what sets him apart is that he, for years, has been the toughest battler against Trudeau. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. He makes a lot of videos. He was very active in the House of Commons. And he doesn't really accept the narrative being pushed by, the establishment media and by the Liberal Party. A lot of other people in the Conservative Party will basically just kind of wait and see what the Liberals are saying about them and then be defensive and respond to that. And of course, if you're constantly defending yourself, then you're not making points against your opponents or against others. So I think the fact that he puts out a lot of content, he fights back, and he pushes his own narrative, I think that's what appeals to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly within the party, who are sick of party leaders who cower before the media. One thing that Poilievre has done is he has vigorously said he'll push back against the CBC. And I don't know, I tend to believe him as opposed to, Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, who might have said that briefly. I want to draw your attention to the polls that you cite in your story, because this isn't just hunches and your own view. This is relying on a wider survey. And Abacus Research, which we should acknowledge is chaired by a partisan Liberal, Bruce Anderson. That said, I think their work can methodologically be relied on generally. They have two interesting slides. I'd like to show the first one to you. It's what the public at large thinks of conservative leadership candidates, which is sort of irrelevant at this point because the public at large will not vote in the conservative leadership. That's just for party members. But the public at large is more supportive of Pierre Poilievre than of Jean Charest. He has more positive support and less negative support. And Charest has pretty big name recognition. In fact, of all the candidates, Charest is the one that is the best known. The smallest number of people say they just don't know. What do you make of those stats?
Well, it's interesting. Another part of the poll that was fascinating was that showed among those who don't currently support the Conservative Party but would be open to it, Poilievre also had much higher ratings than Charest. So I think what's so interesting is there's been the narrative pushed by a lot of people somehow that Pierre Poilievre is very divisive. Oh, the party's divided over Poilievre. Well, not really. I mean, he had, I think, just a 7% of people who had a negative opinion of him and over 50% who had a positive opinion within the Conservative Party. And then Charest's much more even. Way more people in the Conservative Party have a negative view of Charest. So Charest's the candidate who's been divisive. He's the one who divides the party. You look at him in the debates, he's yelling, he's super angry. So the supposedly angry Pierre Poilievre is for the angry Jean Charest. But I think it goes to show how narratives get created, right? They're just going to keep repeating that Poilievre is divisive. They're going to say, Charest is the candidate of experience and unity. And they're just going to hope that if they say it enough, then it'll start to stick in people's minds. But, if we look at the polls and look at the facts, it's obviously Charest who's much more divisive. And really, I think another interesting point is that as we're seeing the attacks against Poilievre become more and more aggressive and unhinged, it really demonstrates that those are attacks not just against him, but against Conservative Party supporters and members themselves. You keep calling the candidate that most people in the party support, you're going to call him racist and extreme. Well, that's what you're really saying about his supporters. So I think it's interesting to note that Charest and Patrick Brown especially are using basically the same rhetoric as the Liberal Party in order to attack people within their own party. And I think that's something people should be aware of.
Yeah, you know what? There's so much tone policing going on by the media. I never see it when Justin Trudeau said, should we tolerate the unvaccinated? Or, you don't see that tone policing when those guys go at it. I think these are angry times. I think that we live in atrocious times. We still have vaccine mandates to get on a plane or a train. I think we're the only country in the world that has that. I think we have an imperious prime minister. I think it's okay for citizens to be angry, not violent, but angry. And it's just a bit much when the Zoom class, when the the editors of the Globe and Mail, owned by Canada's richest oligarch, the Thompson family, when they say, you can't complain about inflation, how dare you take on Tiff Macklin of the Bank of Canada? You know what? I think it's okay for people to be mad at the system. I don't know. And saying, oh, Pierre Poilievre is mad at the system, he's angry, I don't find that disqualifying. If you're part of the, elites that've had a great 2 years, you don't like someone who's turning over tables. But I think Canadians will find Pierre's scrappiness a welcome change. I don't know. That's my own hunch, I guess.
Yeah, when inflation starts to go up, people are going to get more and more angry. And one thing people forget about inflation is when they start saying, oh, look, inflation has gone down to 6 or 5%. Well, that's based on the prices that have already gone up, right? It starts to look like inflation's easing simply because it's inflating from already higher prices. So it's not like it goes back to where it was before and people can afford things all of a sudden. So, but I think it's a good point you made, the tone policing, because what you're really seeing is the worse things get, the more the establishment just gets angry at anybody who dares to point it out, right? It's, this is populist sentiment, this is angry. It's so funny how, when Trudeau ran in 2015 and he did that thing where he walked up the escalator going down, they said, oh, this is how many Canadians feel. They're working harder and harder, but they can't get ahead. That was, brilliant politics, very strategic. And it was a good ad and it was a smart message. But when, Pierre Poilievre says, Canadians are being screwed over by inflation, here's what's caused the problem, here's how we can fix it. All of a sudden, no, this is dangerous. He's undermining faith in our institutions. This is terrible. So I think people really need to see the hypocrisy here and see who benefits from people not addressing the problems we face, who benefits from people not talking about the problems we face. And I think, in a supposedly free and democratic country where institutions are supposed to be accountable to the people, it's interesting how angry people get in the elite class whenever you hear any talk of accountable institutions.
That was an excerpt from my daily TV-style show called The Ezra Levant Show. Each weekday, I do a monologue on the news of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest. I read some fan mail or hate mail, depends on which I like more. And we end with a video of the day. You can get it all at rebelnewsplus.com.